My first point was on the language. I was saying that it's a course in English, but okay, that it's in English just because it's the only way for me to teach here. And this because English has become in the present conditions, the global Esperanto, whether we like it or not. But I have to say that the English we will use here altogether is not the language of the empire. It is just the medium through which we will try to overwhelm our cultural differences. So I think we should try to see this. This is a constant and ordeal for us even. But we can try to see it from, let's say, the positive angle. That is to see it as, of course I don't speak for those for whom English is their mother tongue. It's too easy for them. But okay, we can see it as some kind of a game rather than an obligation. For the English we speak, for most of us here, I think, is imperfect, it's clumsy, and we have to get used to different kinds of accents, way of speaking. We make mistakes. We often have to oversimplify what we mean because our knowledge of this borrowed language is limited. Okay, all this is true, but still we will have to do our best. So even if we don't feel very comfortable in this global borrowed language, we should not, I mean you, same for me, should not feel embarrassed or ashamed. We should just pick up. And I think it will do at the end. And as for me, I can tell you, the more basic your English will be, the better I will understand. So, it's okay. This is not an English course. So this is a seminar on cinema or memory, collective memory, which has to be taught and, okay, which has to take place in this kind of rough international English, and this, as I said, just for technical reasons, because to my great shame, I don't speak Chinese. And so we will try to make the best of possible use of this construct. Basically, I mean, this issue on language question, it's a political issue because, okay, we shouldn't think about, I mean, we people for whom English is a foreign language, a borrowed language, we should not think about it as a sign of distinction. I mean, distinction in the sense of the French sociologist Bourdieu, that is a symbolic matter, a way to come closer to the master, or things like that. We should think about it not in vertical terms, but in horizontal terms, just as a way for us ordinary people, or in post-colonial condition, subalterns to talk with each other. So, okay, we don't try to come closer to the masters, to the core of the empire through language. We, I would say, more like, in the Greek mythology, the Titan Prometheus, who has stolen fire from the gods. He stole the fire from the gods to give it back to the humans. So this kind of gesture we can try to use English by doing this kind of gesture. We hijack the master's language. Okay, this was the first point. I think it's a very important issue. We can talk about it further days later, but okay, I wanted to make this point first so that you feel comfortable by speaking as you like, the way you can, and it will do. Second point, and this is for the same reason, that is English being not for most of us an idiom we have completely, say, tamed or conquered. For this same reason, I write down my presentation papers every week and I hand them out to you so that you can follow as I read my paper. I'm quite aware of the fact that this way of doing teaching is a bit, let's say, scholastic, and it can be boring. But for me, it is the only way to avoid a too great, let's say, loss or waste of information, and the only way to counter the misunderstandings because of deriving from communication problems, question of accent, as I said, and so on and so forth. So, and also it makes it possible for you, if you keep these texts, to go back to them later if something remains unclear in what I said, even after our discussions. Okay, of course I would make things very differently if I would teach, as I'm used to do, in French for French-speaking students. But, and this is the first point, the third point. There is something for me, there is something which does not depend on the language we use, we have to use, mother tongue or borrowed idiom. And this is for me a key issue. What we have to test, what we have to, let's say, experiment together, what we have to try to have a common experience of, is how to tackle our subject, that is in this course, cinema or collective memory. How do we deal with it? How do we grasp it? So what we have to learn and make the experience of is how to argue. I mean, how to develop a line of argument about subjects related to our main issue. And develop a line of argument. It consists basically, very basically, but this is the core of the problem. It consists in putting sentences or ideas, if you prefer, together and moving from a sentence to another. Thinking or understanding, it consists here basically in linking together, that is connecting and not, and this is the point, and not enumerating or listing. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? For the good and simple reason that PowerPoint culture has recently, or from some maybe decades already, PowerPoint culture causes havoc in the global academic culture, and appears to me from that angle as the enemy, or if you prefer in cinematic terms, the terminator of the basic operation of understanding, of arguing and thinking by linking, by connecting, as, let's say, to refer to a very classic reference in the Platonic dialogues. As a rule, maybe we disagree completely on this, but okay, we can discuss. But for me, as a rule, a PowerPoint presentation most of the time looks more or less like a shopping list and not like a well-built reasoning argument. Think about this. We can come again on this issue. But in any case, this is the reason why the texts I deliver, I present here, look, let's say, do not look like an errand list, but let's say more like, I don't know what, a long talk or something like that. And this is the reason why I never use PowerPoint. Because I try to defend here, as I always did in my teaching, the rights of critical thought. And critical thought does not go through PowerPoint. Okay, this is my conviction. The fourth point. Since this is a course on cinema, as you will see, we have to combine the oral part, what I'm doing right now, of the seminar, that is presentation, discussions, etc., with, of course, the showing of clips from films. And this combination is always a bit hazardous, because it's my fault most of the time, I often get lost in the identification of the clips I want to show. Furthermore, sometimes we have problems with the DVDs, different zones and all this kind of thing, or we have problems with the location of the films we want to use, we don't find them. We have problems with subtitles. Many of my films don't have the right subtitles because they come from my country, they come from France, things like that. And okay, many issues of that kind which are problematic. So I exhort you to patience, to be lenient when we get into trouble, when we get into a muddle. We always will do our best, one blow, who helps me and me, to avoid that such kind of failure happens. But I'm sure that still will happen. And please be patient. And, okay, I have to know, and you will notice very quickly that this kind of research and teaching on cinema or with cinema is something experimental here in this institute, and it's also something which is to some extent new for me, and it's a much more complicated device than what is needed for what I was trained for, that is teaching philosophy. Okay. Fifth point. You have here among the papers, you got this paper, and it's not a plan. It's not the summary of the seminar. It's just listing, okay, main issues, themes, motives. But do not expect that I will follow this just in the order you have here. It gives you a rough outline or indication of what the global, the general content of the course will be, of the seminar will be. Okay, I will deal with the different motive issues which are listed here, maybe in a very different way. It depends on many factors, and I cannot predict the way it will actually take place. It depends on discussion on the availability of films and things like that. So you will, for example, the first issue I will raise today, if we have time, okay, it's the fourth point here, the Japanese girlfriend. So, okay. And that would be all, I think. Okay, the general, I cannot redevelop the general problematic of the course. You have, I think you can find the description online, the general description of it, general description of the seminar's intention online. So I'm, okay, basically it will deal with the same issue as what we talked about during the first semester. It's the continuation of what we were busy with in the first semester. The difference maybe being that I will focus on post-war issues. That is mostly collective memory stakes in their relation. Yes, there is of course a sixth point I'm sure you're very interested in. It's about exams. So how you can have your tickets then. So without further ado, I will hand over to one girl on this issue because she is a specialist of it. She can make it in English, she can make it in Chinese too, so that everything is clear for everybody. Okay, so I hand you. I hand it over to you. Okay. Okay, let's come to serious matters. So this is the general, it's a general introduction to the course, for the course. Sorry again, I have to read my paper because it's not my natural language. Once I will do it in French, you will see the difference. So, after the Second World War ended, Hollywood, I'm talking about Hollywood in this first part, but I will not talk all the time about Hollywood. I will talk about many other cinematic issues. So Hollywood had urgently to amend the narratives it had manufactured and put into circulation as the fight to death against the Japanese enemy was raging in the Pacific and in Eastern Asia. But not only Hollywood. The Japanese filmmakers, we will see this later, the Japanese filmmakers also completely rewrote the story of these years at the time of the American occupation of their country and after that. More generally speaking, all the films shot in the post-war era and which deal with the Stokos, I mean, Second World War on the Eastern Front. All these films had to take a distance from the propagandist mobilization films which had been shot during the war. And for some of them, shot almost on the spot. We had examples of that the first semester. And sometimes like in emergency conditions. So these films or filmmakers had to, let's say, revisit the various dramatic scenes of this war in a way which makes or made them differ to various extent from the original narratives, which were, as we saw it last semester, an integral part of the general war device, and this in each country which was involved. So these, let's say, these returns to the sites and to the situations of war had to be critical. They were taken in a process of sobering up and sobering down from the excitement of war. They had to take a distance from the strong feelings and emotions which go with it, from its immediate goals, but which were, we insisted on this in the first semester, which were immediate goals, which were total mobilization of the population, propaganda, and so on. They also had to take into account the often radical changes in the general geopolitical situation in the region, in this region of the world and elsewhere. They had to take into account also the not less radical changes that occurred in the relations between former enemies, mainly Japan and the United States, but as well between former allies having become enemies, the United States versus the Soviet Union and Communist China at the time of Cold War. So for a good part, if not solely, this semester's course will deal with this dimension of filmmaking in its relation to power and collective memory, but also to norms. For very obviously, shooting war films at the time of war, that is at the core of a total war, and shooting films at the time of peace, even relative peace, which can be called Cold War too. It is not exactly the same thing. Or to be more specific, shooting a film on the war in the Philippines at the time this war is still at its peak, or shooting such a film at the time of the war in Vietnam, it's very different. Everybody knows that in the history of a people or a nation, the past has constantly to be rewritten, and this for many reasons. Some reasons depending on the conditions of research, that is on the work of the historians who discover new documents, who work out new interpretations of such or such fact or situation, and some reasons depending on political factors in the immediate present. Cinema is an essential tool and a channel for this rewriting or for this amending activity, that is, rewriting the past. It is even, I would say, the perfect device for doing that, since it is located, settled at the crossroad, that is where politics and where the public, where politics and the public and business meet. It's, the movie making or cinemas as an industry, its strike capacity, that is, its ability to spread statements and messages that print, that is, that get a grip on the public, on the audience. This capacity is extensive and significant. But on the other hand, in democratic and peace conditions, cinema, of course, movie making, is not just a tool in the hands of the rulers. It creates its own space, even if it is a part, as a rule, of, let's say, some hegemonic system. For a good part, cinema can be designed as what French philosophers, Althusser, Nikos Koulantzas, have called ideological state apparatus. It is, by some way, an ideological state apparatus. But it is not only that, and this is what is so fascinating about it, among many other things. Cinema has a capacity to rewrite the past or to rectify former narratives on or of it, exactly the same way, I would say, the painter does, and this by amending his own painting. And this for the general public's sake. And it is a capacity which is incomparable with what historians, with what writers or politicians even can do. And for this reason, because each film which takes such scene or sequence or situation from the past as its subject, each film is a total reinvention of it. And this is a consequence of what cinema is as, let's say, total art. So in the post-war era, movie makers from various countries have not only corrected or adjusted the narratives on war in this part of the world, as it had been staged, as Japan and the Allies were clashing on land, at sea, and in the air. In the post-war era, movie makers have recreated this context in such a, let's say, a performative way that the border between reality and fiction becomes, or has become, indistinct in these films. Cinema, we have to keep this in mind. Cinema is such a powerful narrator, or such, let's say in industrial terms. It is such a manufacturer for narratives that it is constantly on the verge of promoting fictions which are more true than reality, or, and it's about the same, which are more convincing for the audience and for the general public than any other sort or any other genre of narrative on the same subject. Let's take an example. If we, French people, French people, think about D-Day, that is the Normandy landing on the 6th of June, 1944. If we think about this, about D-Day, what we immediately see, what we immediately remember, the way we immediately figure out this event, all the pictures, impressions, dramatic scenes, dialogue, faces, etc., all this comes to us, for us, from the famous Daryl Zanuck film, which if each of us, French people, has seen many times, I mean, of course, The Longest Day, which was shot 1961. And so this film, being a much more powerful narrative machine than all what school, teaching, newspapers, speeches by political leaders can provide us as a national public with. So it is this reinvention, this recreation process by the war film in the post-Second World War era until the most recent period, now. It is this I would like to study this semester. By tackling this issue from various angles and through all kinds of examples, I would like to show how this very dramatic past is constantly politicized in the present. That is to show how this history of war becomes, as it is a stake for collective memory and for interstates and nations' relations, a political matter, and a very explosive one. The politicization of the past, and of this past in particular, is something special. It's something specific for this part, or for this dimension of the Second World War. In the West, by contrast, in the West, politicians, statesmen from different countries, which belong at that time, at the time of the Second World War, which belonged to conflicting camps. These people, today, they do not fight, they do not quarrel on the issue, on that issue in general, or even on such or such aspect of it. They, as they say, they let the historian do their job, that is commenting, rewriting past history. And they entrust the historians with the task to issue authoritative and well-documented narratives of this sequence of our common history, the Second World War in the West. As a rule, they do not interfere in the historians' debates. They agree even on the main features of the narration of this past, or at least they do as if they would agree on it. And for this reason, and for this very reason, a German chancellor and a French president can pretty well commemorate together the end of the Second World War. And so in a very striking contrast, this past appears to be here in Eastern Asia a more and more embittered matter of contention, of discord. Example, classical example, the so-called comfort women of the Japanese Imperial Army having recently become a symbolic condensation point of these disputes on the past. You can see on this articles I have photographed for you. So, in a context of growing tensions between regional states, nations, powers, but as well between mainland China and the United States, the past, and specifically this apocalyptic sequence of the past, Second World War in the East, in the Pacific. This scene, this global scene, is constantly re-intensified as a bone of contention. The past, and in particular some scenes of it, the past tends to become some sort of a weapon or time bomb in an endless war of narratives. This notion of war of narratives is important for our issue. It's some kind of a psychological war whose emotional or affective dimension involves strong feelings or conducts like, let's say, guilt, shame, denial, remorse, anger, confession, etc. The controversial past is, literally speaking, taken hostage by the contemporaries who rekindle all the quarrels on it. As a consequence, the question I would like to ask in this seminar is, what is the specific game of cinema or of movie making? What is the special game of the industry and the business of cinema, and as well of movie makers as artists and narrators in this context? How do all these protagonists of cinema, as once again both an art as an industry, how do they get involved in the politicization process of the past? How do they extricate themselves from this very complex, or involve themselves in this very complex context? There's a special vocation of movie making as a power, ideological or whatever, as a manufacturer for narratives. Does a special vocation of movie making manifest itself in such a context, and this for the better or for the worse? I have to say that the term I use here, rewriting the past, this term is very approximate, and to some extent it's wrong, it's delusive. And this for the good reason that filmmaking does not only amount to writing a story, and very far from that. The term reinvention of the past would be much more appropriate here. This reinvention can take many forms. In some cases, some aspects of the current version of this story, the war, Second World War in the Pacific and in East Asia, has become so shocking, so incorrect, according to new norms and sensibilities in the post-war era, that they just have urgently to be erased, buried, forgotten. In such a case, a new narrative made of new statements, of new pictures, of new bodies, of new names, symbols, etc., appeared, whose vocation was to be superimposed on the original and to make the original disappear, to make it invisible, to dissolve it, to erase it. And this is the first issue I will deal with. But you will see there exist many other gestures, tactics, which go this direction or can be implemented for this purpose. Revisiting the scenes of war can be one of these gestures, and on this occasion, discovering that things did not exactly happen as previous narratives reported it or tried to establish it. That the real actors involved in this context were different from what the previous versions of the story or episode did. And this is, it has become almost a classical example already. This is what Clint Eastwood very distinctly, very clearly does in his two films on the battle at Iwo Jima, Letters from Iwo Jima and Flag of Our Fathers. But we talked about it last semester as well in a completely different direction, what a Japanese filmmaker does in Oba, The Last Samurai, which is a neo-nationalist, neo-patriotic film on the battle on Saipan, on the island of Saipan. Another device I associate with this general issue of rewriting or reinventing the past is, and this is very important too, that is the restoration or the re-establishment of the reverse angle shot, angle shot. What does this mean? It means something, it designs something very simple, very elementary. It's very easy to understand. In the original version of the war narratives, I mean, as the war was raging, the films themselves are weapons, they are tools, they are integral part of the war efforts. They are instruments of the total mobilization of a nation. And for this very reason, they have only one angle. Their only angle is that of the nation at war, which is facing its enemy. So they merge with the state propaganda and, let's say, the national interest in general. These films shot during the war, they cannot afford to take into consideration that the other, that is the enemy as the other. They cannot afford to take into consideration that the other might also have its own reasons, or his own reasons, his own vision of things. And there's from different angles, the angle of justice, the angle of legitimacy, morality, common sense, whatever. So in brief, this first generation of war films have been shot from only one angle, that of the nation or the camp they emanate from. The other as enemy, as the enemy, as the total enemy in this context. The other as enemy has its place in these films. It has, or he has to be shown in this film, presented as a film. But he is then constantly incarnated, embodied by more or less stereotyped actors and characters. He acts in a more or less predictable way, but what is missing is the reverse angle shot. That is his own view on what is at stake in the world, on the situations which are depicted in the film. What is missing are his own reasons for doing what he does, for feeling as he does, for behaving as he does. A mobilization film cannot be in keeping with the general patterns of plurality and of relativity of one position to another. It has to make the position it promotes something absolute and indisputable. This elimination of the other's position, as it is the enemy's angle, is an inseparable condition for the efficiency for a good propagandist use of the film. And so, in the post-war era, for different reasons, I've already mentioned by passing, the point of view of this other, and not only his human face, his point of view, his viewpoint, has more or less urgently to be restored. And this is what so many films, American films, Japanese films, British, Chinese, French, etc., are trying very hard to do. In the terms of cinematic language, this gesture can be designed as what I call the re-establishment or the restoration of the reverse angle shot. This restoration is a part of the general process of rehumanization of the former enemy, and cinema takes a big part in this process, a very active part in this process. So this process aims at cancelling what was at stake in the previous stage. That is, the degrading of the enemy from his human status, as it took place in the conditions of total war. But this process of rehumanization of the enemy cannot only consist in just replacing these grimacing monkeys we saw in different films, monkey faces, in replacing these monkey faces with just human or even pleasant faces. It has to go farther. It has to make some more steps, and it has to restore this other, the former enemy, in his or in her subjective dimension, in all the complexity of its dimension. It has to give us back, to restore all his thoughts, his feelings, his past relations, to his family, his character, his position, etc. So I will try to show how this restoration process works, is implemented in different films, how it goes through different devices, through different methods and procedures. It is very fascinating because it is an exemplary situation in which cinema's plasticity, cinema's flexibility is at work. Or if you prefer, what we discover here is the ability of cinema to adapt itself to new conditions, to adapt itself to new rules, to new norms, or maybe what we could name its specific opportunistic character. I will come back to this issue. That is, its readiness to retouch, to redo yesterday's work, and this as many times as needed. Cinema as an art and as some kind of a collective living organism or system has a very special capacity, or even a specific propensity to eliminate its own traces. And this is what makes it possible for Hollywood to promote on a very short span, let's say 10 years, two completely contradictory images of the Japanese. The monster in the first sequence, and then the good guy or the kind, nice, cute Japanese girlfriend. And I will try to illustrate this figure with various examples. And to finish with this point, why is the restoration of the reverse angle shot such an important question at this place? For the good reason that it is one of the most exemplary contributions of cinema to democratic culture. As a technical device or as an element of cinematic language, the dialectic shot, reverse angle shot, is an illustration or a practical implementation of what Hannah Arendt says about democracy taken into account as a pluralistic space. It is a configuration made of combined position, or precisely angles, combined angles, which all of them are different, which never can coincide, but which have to meet at a certain point. From this perspective, pluralism is the essence of democracy. That is, democracy is made of the combination of different, that is of a variable number of points of view. And for this reason, no one can expect that those who hold these different positions have to agree upon what is the object of their discussion or deliberation. And this, since their angles or their views are never the same. For this reason, not only discussion but conflict, that is the confrontation between opinions, point of view, which are always heterogeneous, all this is a basic and founding element of democracy. So in the dialectic shot, reverse angle shot, this heterogeneity of the positions which are facing one another in a common shared space, this heterogeneity, or this condition of heterogeneity, is simplified. Instead of, let's say, X positions, only two in general, as a rule, are confronting each other. It is not only conversation and exchange of words and sentences. What the cinematic device gives prominence to is that each time one of the characters involved in this exchange speaks, answers, objects, retorts, the angle of view changes. That is, it's a new view on the world that comes to the floor. And this with all of its own background, its origin, its personal history, its personal disposition, etc. A view, of course, which differs from the previous and often is in conflict with it. And this is the reason why, let's say, the court film as a genre, or the classic genre, in Hollywood, but not only in Hollywood, is paradigmatic for this use of the shot, reverse angle shot device. Because in the court film, what we see are various conflicting positions which are at odds. That is the position of the defendant, the position of the victim, the position of the prosecutor, the position of the witness, different witnesses, and so on. And of course, the audience doesn't know where and what the truth is in the plot. The court is, in that sense, a perfect democratic space. In a famous, very famous film like 12 Angry Men, written by Sidney Lumet, you certainly saw it. The diffraction of the viewpoints on the case reaches its peak. 12 members of the jury, each of them embodying a specific, unique, and original position, that is an angle of view on it. The democratic space is a room where they, the jury, are confined and where they talk together on this until they have reached a common decision. So, I hope it's clear for you at what the purpose of this digression on Hollywood is on dialectic shot, reverse angle shot, and democracy is aiming. For our subject, the moment or the various occasions as the representation of the enemy or the enemy changes to such an extent that his position and status is restored in the shot, reverse angle shot. This moment or this occasion is crucial. For it means that the state of exception in which the enemy taken into consideration as a mortal threat, this state of exception is suspended. That the enemy has, from this moment on, the state of exception is suspended. The enemy has made up for us, the public, the audience, with the common human condition. That his otherness is, again, compatible with democratic relations. In brief, this former enemy's capacity or this former enemy's power to think, to speak, to feel, to be a member of a community as a human being, all this has been re-established. This process of normalization of the enemy in post-war films can be appraised from very different and even from contrasting angles, as you will see. On one hand, it shows that movie making, that cinema as a global device, which also is a form of power, an element of culture, a communication apparatus, is, or at least can be, in certain circumstances, an incentive to develop democratic tendencies and sensibilities. A good example here would be the question of language. In late epic sea battle films, let's say film from the 80s of last centuries, big budget films like Midway, Tora, 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 The Gallant Hours, many others, which deal with the very sensitive scene of Pearl Harbor. But in these films from the 80s or from the 80s on, the high-ranking officers of the Japanese Navy do not only look very respectable and dignified in their immaculate white uniforms, sometimes black, but very clean. They also deliberate about strategic and tactical matters in Japanese or in English, it depends on the films, but always in a very calm, in a very considered way. They are all except, they are not at all restless fanatics. They express all kinds of reservations about the aims and the purposes of this war, but of course, as soldiers, they have to be loyal to their superiors and to the emperor, so they are torn apart between their intuition that the war is due to failure for them, for Japan, and their allegiance to their superiors and to the emperor. In short, they are humans. They are humans, exactly like their opponents. They are not monsters. They are just, let's say, different color pieces on the chessboard of war. In this kind of picture, these staunch officers contrast, of course, acutely with the classical image of the Japanese soldier as a brute, as a beast, yelling, insulting, threatening, beating up, hitting hard, defenseless prisoners or civilians. This image, which was conveyed by constantly, repeatedly conveyed by Hollywood films, which have been shot at the time of the war itself, or even sometimes after the end of the war. This shift from one picture of the eternal enemy to the other, that is yesterday's enemy, who has become, who happens to have become an ally and a friend, this can be described as, of course, a democratic move in terms of restoration of plurality as the basic condition for common life or for the coexistence of different human communities. But I would say as well, this change in the tone or the tune of cinema, this change can as well be looked at as a perfect example of the deeply rooted opportunistic dimension of cinema, of movie making. So far as historical matters, collective memory states, disputed scenes of the past are concerned. The complete rewriting and even the inversion of the signs of the narration of these scenes can be described as well as some kind of whitewashing. That is, the dirty money of past, of original narratives. This dirty money, which has become out of use or which is unpresent, undefensible. This dirty money of the narrative, of the past narrative, is just washed out. It's washed out by new stories, these new stories, which are in accordance with new norms, patterns, present conditions and sensibilities, and whose vocation it is to rub out the previous ones. Movie making reinvents for its own sake and according to its own capacities, which are immense, the technique, the old technique, the ancestral technique of palimpsest. Palimpsest, it was the way the Middle Ages copyist monks used to rub out a parchment or vellum so that a new text can be copied on it at the place of the former one. And this intrinsic opportunism of cinema as a manufacturer for narratives consists at this place in, and this is very important too, it consists basically in attaching a much greater value to the compatibility of the narration of these painful and contentious scenes from the past with present norms, with present patterns and sensibilities, than to the fact themselves. That is, by fact I mean just simply how things really happened, what situations actually were, how people involved in them really behaved, who did what, where, etc. From this angle, the past has constantly to be amended by the new cinematographic narratives for the good reason, imperative reason, that it became immoral, that it has got, let's say, rotten like an overripe fruit. So the past, as narrated before, this past, as narrated before, it has begun to stink, and for this reason, it has to be rewritten. This way, cinema is a perfect dynamic actor of collective memory and of the moralization of the past. For it is always available, always ready for promoting new narratives which fit the moods or inclinations of the living, I mean of the contemporaries. A classical, let me remind you, a classical joke was a classical joke at the time of the totalitarian regime in the Soviet Union, which consisted in inverting the well-known saying, one never knows what tomorrow or what the future will be made of or what it will look like, inverting it into one never knows what yesterday, that is the past, will be made of, what will look like. And this, of course, in the Soviet Union at the time of Stalin, referred to the way the regime was constantly rewriting history according to the hazards of its present political course. And I would be inclined to say, let's say, ironically, that the way the industry of cinema in the West, as well as in the East, has actively and cheerfully rewritten, or rather reenacted, the Second World War in the Pacific and in Eastern Asia in the post-war era, and they still now, in our present, this is, I would say, ironically, it's a sophisticated, generally democratic version of this totalitarian gesture. You will see, we'll talk about this, I will try to show you this, the way Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, who is depicted as a warmonger, as a war criminal by Hollywood at the time of the war, then is transfigured some decades or even maybe some years later in other films into this harmless, innocent, overtaken by the events of the war, manipulated toy in the hands of Tojo and his clique. And then you will see as he becomes General MacArthur's pet and paw. Okay, so I think there is something here that remains absolutely unsettled, which is undecided. Is cinema, in its function as, let's say, political, ideological washing machine for narratives, whose smell has become to be rather unpleasant in the present, is cinema in this role, is it an intrinsically cynical apparatus? So what the typically cynical gesture or attitude would be at this place, it's clear. It is the quiet confidence movie makers and in general the industry of cinema displays that facts from the past, we are talking about facts from the past events, actually facts do not matter so much. Or they matter in general, very roughly, as a very general feature. And what really matters is the performative quality of narrative. So is it like this? In other terms, now this would mean the completely cynical attitude, or the cynical attitude till its last end. It would mean that reality actually is an illusion because it doesn't exist before its narration. Narratives do not account for reality. They do not report about reality. They build it up. They shape it. They invent it. In terms of power, this statement would establish the supremacy of the narrator over the past, taken into account as something inert, an inert reality, a set of facts, situations, and actions. In movie making, this feeling of omnipotence, absolute power of the narrator can reach its climax. The narrator becomes some kind of a demiurge. This capacity, of course, this capacity of cinema, of movie making, it's both fascinating and frightening. But as well, we can see it from the reverse angle. It is, as well, an incentive not to stick to dogmatic, to fossilized narrative of the past, as an incentive to re-examine such or such disputed scene from a new angle. We can see it, this capacity of cinema, as an incentive to see the past, not as an inert reality, but as a crystal. That is something which has to be looked at from different angles. Okay, I have finished for this part, so enough general talk. And okay, I will pass then to films. And what I call, ironically, the Japanese girlfriend parody. But okay, we will see this in the second part of this. Maybe we have. Okay? No?
Right.
Or, yeah? Okay, you need the rest? I need it too. It's okay. Okay, 10-minute breaks. So it's about what I call, ironically, the Japanese girlfriend parody. But it's about a love story which is frustrated by the circumstances of war. Love story between an American boy and Japanese girl. But actually for what is at stake here, it is about the correction, the adjustment of the Japanese image in Hollywood's film in the post-war period and later. So I will, on this chapter, on this issue, I will present different films which deal with this question, and this from different angles, but all of them are working hard, you will see, in order to erase the picture of the Japanese as the malicious beast. And this, okay, by writing a new story on the slate, on the writing, the magic writing slate of cinema as a manufacturer for historical narrative. So I don't know how many of these films we'll have time to see here, but at least I want to show you one so that you see how it works. This film, the first film is not, properly speaking, about the Japanese girlfriend, but it's about Japanese people. This film is called Go for Broke. It has been shot by a filmmaker whose name is rather Pirosh in 1951. The title, Go for Broke, it's from an idiomatic expression which means to gamble, to stake everything. And two words about Pirosh is an American screenwriter, director. He's not really world famous. He has worked as junior writer for one of the majors, the MGM, in particular on two Marx Brothers comedies. And this has to be mentioned, Go for Broke has been his first film as a director. And it's interesting to note, just by passing, that this film, which is not, as you certainly will notice, which is not a masterpiece, still it has been nominated for an Oscar, which was, I imagine, some kind of a reward for its political correctness at the time it was released, that is, at the beginning of the 50s of last century. So, I gave you the plots from Wikipedia, which are borrowed from Wikipedia, so you can use them, but I just give you some elements, some hints about what the plot is, with some comments on it before we go to the clips of the film. So it's a film about young American boys, Americans, but all of them from Japanese origin. And these boys have in common that they have volunteered for the war after Pearl Harbor in the United States, in Hawaii too, because as you know, in Hawaii exists a big community, people from Japanese origin. And of course, by volunteering, they have displayed this way their patriotic feelings, American patriotic feelings, their loyalty to their country of adoption, the United States of America. As you will see in the clips at the beginning, they are very inexperienced, they are rather clumsy, but they show willingness and stamina. And after they have been properly trained and taken in hand by competent officers, non-commissioned officers, they become excellent soldiers. They will be fighting on the European soil, European front, from Sicily to the Ardennes, that is at the border of France, Belgium, and Germany. Notice just by passing that the High Command of the US Army has wisely refrained from sending them to the Pacific and fight against other Japanese. So this is very openly, as you will notice, I would say in a not very subtle way, a heavily pedagogic film. Or we could say a re-education film, directly aimed at the American public. At its beginning, the Caucasian, the white-skinned Vietnam from Texas, who is in charge with their training, is very much prejudiced against them, so racial prejudices, cultural prejudices, but after having lived with them, mixed with them, he completely changed his position. They command his respect, since they are such good army friends and so brave in the fight. And at the end of the war, he himself, the Texan, he fights with another officer who has called them Japs. And he makes things clear. They should not be called Japs, but American, Japanese, or Nisei soldiers. And this it has in the exact same terms as his superiors had at the beginning of the film. And in this dialogue, the American public is, of course, directly addressed to, so that he has to forget, to forego the bad habits that have been instilled to him during the war time. The American public, the American audience is exhorted to forget these bad words like chaps, nips, and so on. With words which came to him from the authority, but okay, it's like that. Re-education film. This film is placed under, you will notice at the beginning, the sign of a quotation from President Roosevelt saying that what he is interested in as a President of the United States is the mobilization of all American citizens, no matter what their origin, ethnic, religious, and so on, origin is. The interesting thing in the narrative device of the film is not only that it completely rephrases the very sensitive question of the imprisonment of the Nisei after Pearl Harbor. It is also that it just replaces, that's the way it works in this manufacture for narratives. That's exactly the way it works in such a case. Replacement of a Japanese subject or object with another. Just the same way you replace a spare part in a car with another. That is the ruthless, treacherous enemy that had to be fought in the jungle, as you can see in the wartime films, is replaced with the valiant, gallant brother in arms who faces the Nazis on the European front. And this simple substitution of an image for another is one of the usual tricks or manufacturing processes of cinema in such a configuration where the narration of the past has very urgently to be corrected. That is where a new image and a new text have to come and replace the original. And at the end, things are very simple. The terrible Jap, who was just a transient, a fleeting character, which has been erased, which has been discharged, dismissed, so that he can be replaced by these modest, exemplary heroes, these Japanese American soldiers fighting the Nazi on the Western Front. So let's see a few clips now. I try to select clips which are not too short, but it's not always easy, so okay, sometimes it has to be only 2 minutes, but it's important to see this 2 minutes. Okay, I hope it will